Hey, today I am on the outskirts of the jungle here in northern Peru. And in this video I want to explain something. I know that some of you who follow me were quite excited about the fact that I shot with a Micro Four Thirds camera. I was always upfront about that. In fact, I was very excited about that, so much so that I became a Panasonic Lumix Ambassador. But for a while now, if you asked me what camera I use, you would have received an answer that I very rarely use the Lumixes now. In fact, I'm no longer a Panasonic Lumix Ambassador.
Hey, I'm Mitchell. For the past decade, I've been living my dream, journeying around the world as a professional travel photographer. During this time, I've seen and I've learned a lot. And now I want to share the knowledge with you. Come along on the journey.
It's been over a year now, so I can legally talk about this, and I guess I'm just letting everybody know officially and want to explain why I am no longer a Panasonic Lumix Ambassador. You might be interested to know some of the technical reasons behind why the Lumix is no longer my choice. And I'll also tell you about some of the obstacles that I faced as an ambassador, things that I guess are just a part of the industry. Also, I will tell you some of the other reasons behind why we parted ways. Now, if you think that you'll hear something gossipy or dramatic, well, you won't. I don't have anything bad to say about Panasonic or anybody who I worked with. I actually truly appreciate the opportunity that they had given me. But yes, there were some factors behind why I wanted to go in a different direction and why they did too. Firstly though, I want to show you some of my favorite and what I think are some of my best photos with the Lumix cameras. I used Lumix cameras pretty much exclusively for around 4 years. Soon after acquiring a couple of Lumix camera bodies, I fell in love with their system, and I even approached Panasonic to ask if there was any way in which we could collaborate. They liked my work enough and were forthcoming enough to offer me a spot as a European ambassador, despite the fact that I'm not technically European as per their definition. I only have an Australian passport, and while I was born in Belarus, Belarus is not a part of what is defined to be the European region by Panasonic Europe. I agreed to be an ambassador, of course, and the deal that I chose was not to receive money, but to receive free gear, all the latest greatest stuff before it came out to the general public. This decision was awesome at first, when I was around Europe, but it kind of played part in me parting ways with Panasonic later. Because of some of the internal rules and regulations, Panasonic Europe could not send me stuff outside of Europe, so I stopped getting all that latest greatest gear at the point that I went to South America. Now, a very important factor behind why we parted ways. When we started our relationship, I guess maybe the expectations were set too high from my side, but that's because the beginning of the relationship was so amazing. Almost immediately after I signed the contract, Panasonic used me in a campaign for an exciting new camera. I shot the stills for the campaign. They were printed in this beautiful booklet. I starred in some of the online ads. There were giant posters with my head on them, and even went on a tour around Europe promoting the camera with my friend and fellow ambassador Jacob James. Good times, very decent money, and I mean, honestly, it was a dream situation. Also, I was really excited to have this new platform, so I thought that I would propose another project which I truly felt was way better than the campaign which we just shot. But here's where I got a bit disillusioned and jaded. I guess I realized that big corporations don't work the same way that smaller companies or individuals do. There are politics involved, and even if some people inside of the company really love your idea, they still have to make sure that the politics are covered. I suppose they couldn't just give this large chunk of money to somebody who wasn't even technically a European and have other ambassadors miss out. They had a certain budget allotted, and even if the other ambassadors weren't going to be coming up with any proposals, I mean, I remember there was a handful, but whatever the case was going to be, they had to divide that budget equally. So that's why I felt that the decision was much more sort of political rather than based on merit. I mentioned my idea inside of Panasonic a few more times over a few months, but I was made to understand that it wasn't happening. So maybe I was naive, maybe I was unrealistic, whatever it was, that experience really kind of put me off, and I didn't want to invest any more of my energy into making more proposals. I know if I stuck with it, if I'd kept sending proposals, if I kept going to the different expos in Europe, making contacts, talking to the right people, something probably would have come out from it. It did for some of my friends. But look, honestly, I'm not the kind of person who thrives in a system. In fact, I've been avoiding systems all of my adult life. I've been obsessed with being independent. That's what I pride myself on. That's what I value most. And having to play by these rules to climb this ladder of success of sorts in order to find a couple of projects, that was not a price that I was willing to pay. I wanted to invest my energy in other things, like a YouTube channel or just creating work rather than sending proposals to create work. With all of that said though, here's the most important factor behind why I'm no longer a Panasonic Lumix Ambassador. I stopped using their cameras. Not entirely, but for most part. This started when I began to shoot more video. Now, let me make it clear, I still think that Panasonic Lumix cameras are far superior to many other brands in many ways, but when it comes to shooting run and gun style video, great autofocus is a huge plus. I would even go to say as far that it is a must, and the Lumix cameras didn't have that back then, and they still don't. They still haven't solved that issue today. So there have been a lot of firmware updates, hacks from users, all kinds of official updates, but the Lumix cameras still cannot autofocus quickly enough and lock onto the subject reliably enough. I tried and I tried until I just sort of gave up because I couldn't get the results that I wanted. So I wanted to try a Sony camera, since Sony is famous for its autofocus. And after I tried the Sony, I was really quite impressed and gradually started to buy into their system. The autofocus on the Sonys is amazing. It feels almost like you're using some voodoo magic at times. And when I got this full frame A7 III, I also realized that there were other things which I was missing out on. One of these things, shooting at very high ISO. I didn't realize just how far Sony had come in relation to high ISO. The Micro Four Thirds cameras, they're really not usable beyond about 3200 ISO. Yes, they have some affordable fast prime lenses, but there's still a limit to what you can do with them if you're not shooting at high ISO. Some people do say, oh, there's this full frame aesthetic, it's just the best, but honestly, I was not that desperate for the full frame aesthetic. I do love a good bokeh every now and then, but I'm not obsessed with it. And again, Panasonic do have some fast primes with aperture as low as f1.2. I could still easily do the shallow depth of field thing. The dynamic range though, that's another thing that I did notice was better with the full frame A7 III. Not like miles better, but significant enough. Also, while the touch focus was plenty good for still photos with my Lumix cameras, I did find it beneficial to not even have to touch anything at times with the Sony. The eye autofocus is amazing, as is the face autofocus. These features are game changers. Sure, you could do without them, but I'm the kind of person who likes to take advantage of the latest technology. Whatever can bring me closer to my creative vision with a higher success rate, I am all for it. So I went into the Sony system for the autofocus, then I realized that there are other things which are better too, and I kind of never went back. Well, I do still use one of the Lumix cameras. That's this one, the G9, one of the most underrated, most ahead of its time cameras ever made. I got the V-Log profile for it, which is like the S-Log on the Sonys. It has many other features and it is pretty amazing. But the main purpose that I use it for? Time lapses. Panasonic does time lapses better than anyone that I know of. I have to just put that out there. And another reason why I use this is the long lens stuff. You see, this fairly small lens is the equivalent to a 400mm lens on a full frame camera. If I were to get a 400mm lens for a Sony full frame camera, it'd be huge, it'd be heavy, and I already have a truck full of stuff so that I don't need any more big things. So I stopped using the Lumix for most part. And when I'd get these ambassador emails asking to upload our latest work to the ambassador portal, well, I had nothing to upload. I wasn't getting any new gear since I wasn't in Europe and wasn't planning to be in Europe anytime soon. By this stage, I didn't really see any point for our relationship to continue, but I thought, well, it doesn't hurt to have Panasonic Lumix Ambassador next to my name, so I don't know, let's go with the flow and see how things play out. Then last year, once the pandemic hit, I guess Panasonic started to revise where things were at, and I got an email from the person in charge of the ambassadors. The email went something like this: "Hey Mitchell, you haven't sent us anything in a couple of years, so if you're not into it, we'd like to offer your spot to somebody who is into it." I agreed, we parted ways on good terms. I still think that the people who work at Panasonic are great, they're wonderful, and it was an honor to work with them. I just wish that some of these big companies didn't work the way they do. Maybe, again, that's the naive part of me, but I wish that the internal politics wouldn't take precedence over creativity or over the enthusiasm of some of the ambassadors. But at the end of the day, I could always go my own way. I could do my own stuff. I could find my own ways to fund projects, which is in fact what I did do even while I was an ambassador, so no drama. So yeah, that's the story. Those are the reasons why I am no longer a Panasonic Lumix Ambassador. I do feel a little more free as a result, just psychologically. Not that I had anything bad to say about Panasonic, but I can sing the praise of other camera brands now if I so choose to, and I am not an ambassador of any brand at the moment. I kind of like it that way for now. Sony is my choice at the moment. I don't feel that any camera is completely perfect, but for my purposes, for what I do now, Sony seems to create what is the closest to perfection for me. So, just wanted to update you all, to get this out there, to not feel like I am misleading some of you who are huge Micro Four Thirds fans and who maybe thought that I was still shooting using the Micro Four Thirds system. Also, this video will make some of the other videos that I'll be creating in the future make more sense. Thank you very much for watching. I always appreciate your time. If you like what I do, please press like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all of that sort of stuff, because there will be many more videos in the future. I will see you in the future, and goodbye for now.